Nina kuphi emakhaya amadolobheni asekomplasta khona sanibonana ke bekunene ke and warm greetings to you all sanibukela ke hlelo lethu ilungelo lakho it's your right asinathise ke bekunene ukuthi namhla sesibuyele futhi ihlelo lethu ke lusakatwa li-hour njengenjwayelo mina ke ngisimpiwe ngcongwane bekunene namhla sitawubuka ukuthi sihamba njani ke sithembiso samasipala waseJozi sekusula tikwenethi tebathengi labangasakhoni kumelana nekukhokhela tidzingo tabo ngesizathu ke sebumadima lobulethwe ke-COVID ingabe bangakhi bathengi lesibasitakeleka noluhlelo And of course, the good news is that for those who missed out on the City of Johannesburg's Amnesty program, our guests are here to tell us more about it and its extension. Manje kusitshela kabanti ke asesimungele ke Nyaniso Jeku lokhulumela ke masipala waseJozi siphinde samungele ke Nkosikhulule Nyembezi lo Policy Analyst and Researcher ke yena ke ulapha ke kuZoom. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you. Sanibukele hleleni.
Nkosikhulule moloko kuwe.
Mr. Nyembezi siyakumula nawe hleleni baba. Okay, Mr. Jeku, angicela ngawe ukuthi ke what prompted the city of Joburg ukuthi ke to embark on this debt rehabilitation program?
Well, what actually prompted the city, it was part of its ongoing efforts in caring for the residents of the city of Johannesburg. Basically, the city looked at the high levels of indebtedness of the ratepayers and decided that, you know what, maybe we need to come up with a plan of at least lending a helping hand as the city of Johannesburg towards our residents. So the city decided that due to COVID-19, some ratepayers have lost jobs, some did no longer qualify or at least manage to pay the rates as they would have initially started. So what basically happened is that with also a lot of people working from home and students learning from home, there was an increased volume of people in the household. So as a result, that would have basically increased the consumption of water, of electricity. So the city said, in its caring approach, let it try to assist where it can. And that is what basically prompted this approach.
Okay. Asasibele mva kancane ke Jeku so usithathe ukuthi ke bobani ke abaqualifya ukuthi ke bathole ke lokusula kwetikwenethi nekuthi ke ngilaba njani labo ngilabasebentako noma ngilabangasebenzi.
Okay. Into enzekileyo abantu abaqualifyayo babafumane ukosulelwa amatyala abo ngumasipala waseJohannesburg. One, ngabantu abanezindlu ezinga exceed ivalue ye-1.5 million rands. Number two, there's different categories of income levels ekufuneka bafikelele kuzo. So number three, i-account be in arrears over 90 days by 31st December 2020. And then Abu Bandaba must come forward and then apply for this debt rehabilitation program. The purpose is to make sure that ekugqibeleni bayakwazi ubhatala amatyala abo and bayakwazi uba free from debt, because a lot of South Africans are highly and heavily indebted, and as a result azikwazi uba zibehambisa ubhatala amatyala azo. Also, the rehabilitation approach is that once ubhatale, once usukosulele ihafu yetyala lakho xa uthe qualify, then you need to keep your end of the bargain and continue paying. The hope is that ekugqibeleni abahlali bazakwazi uba bayibone nje into ebalulekileyo into yokubhatalelwa kwee-services eziswa ngumasipala on an ongoing basis. Would love to get to a situation whereby abahlali okanye abanikazi bezindlu ke abakweleti and that umasipala uza kuqala kuzo zonke izinto ekufuneka bezihlawule xa befumana imali.
Ngalamafishane ke lokubuyela kwemva kwesikwenethi sibuyela muva as far back as 90 days, not further than that.
No. It's the level of debt that must have been at 90 days in order to qualify. Then what is written off, 50% where debt yakho if your salary is 22,000 and below. So you qualify for a write-off of 50% of your debt, regardless of how much it is, as long as at 31st December 2020, ibiku 90 days in arrears. Then the remaining 50% is what you will pay when you enter into a payment arrangement with Masipala waseJohannesburg and then pay over 3 years. Hoping that you will be able to finish that debt, because part of what you must do, there's a current consumption, meaning imali lo ichajwa ngumasipala inyanga nenyanga, amanzi, umbane, i-rates, i-refuse removal, ekufuneka uyibhatele on an ongoing basis. There's also the debt portion that you must also pay on an ongoing basis. Then that will enable you to further pay your entire debt as it is.
Nguvo ukhuluma nge-salary as one of the considerations. How about ama-pensioners ke?
Well,
bona ba-qualify?
Well, we look at your household income. If your household income is at 22,000 and below, you qualify for a 50% write-off. If it's just above 22,000 to 30,000, you qualify for a 30%, then it goes up to 50,000. So basically, anybody whose household, so if a pensioner has got a household income below that level, because ekugqibeleni while umasipala will be writing off a portion of your debt, there's a remaining portion that must still be paid by yourself. There's an ongoing current consumption for services provided to yourself by the City of Johannesburg that must also be paid on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Mr. Nyembezi, let me also bring you into this conversation. I mean, in your view, is this an effective and sustainable way by the City of Johannesburg to remove debt?
Thank you very much again for inviting me. First of all, one can say it is a positive move. It must be commended because the City of Johannesburg has realized that people are indebted. However, it is limited, it is restricted, and it is only likely to impact few people. Number one, we understand that the indebtedness came about because people are not working. So the irregularity of income, the unpredictability of income is going to restrict a lot of people who could either qualify from coming forward to say, yes, I commit myself on my side of the bargain, just because people are unemployed and they rely on informal economy. It works today, it doesn't work today. Number two, the issue about the assessment, the criteria that is used, 22,000 Rand a month, also has got its own shortcomings. Because when you look at what constitutes income, you might find that for some people it's the social grants, which doesn't qualify as an income, but that's what they live and depend on. And we know social grants are received by the elderly, the disabled, and the children. Other people have been retrenched from their work. They are receiving unemployment insurance fund payouts. And we know that you cannot use UIF as a security for a debt to enter into an agreement with a municipality to say, I will hold my side of the bargain. So it's a good step, but it might need to be revised soon so as to encompass everybody who is supposed to qualify.
Siyathi it will become a very, very costly and expensive exercise. Will it not in the long term taxpayers namasipala?
Not so much, because water and electricity are public goods. In the Constitution, the right of access to water is put there. And that is why the municipality needs to have this indigency policy, so as to be able to say, how do we make sure that you access the minimum amount of, or maybe not the minimum, the set amount of kiloliters of water which a resident must get, the set amount of kilowatts of electricity which a resident must get, and so on. But what we have found to be missing in our policy throughout municipalities is that while that subsidized portion is touted as a free basic access, you still need to pay first before you can access those kilowatts. You still have to pay first before you can access water. So the question would be now, for these indebted households, what is it that the municipality is doing before the first payment is made? Do people have access to that water and electricity? And in most cases, the answer would be no. So here is the point. In the context of chronic unemployment in the household, you then find that people depend on izinyoka for connection, for what we could call connections outside of the ESCOM or the municipality. And they are unlikely to be moved by this call to enter into an agreement with a municipality when they know that they have no source of payment that they can guarantee.
All right, let's leave with them. Mr. Nyembezi, thank you so much for joining us. We'll touch base with you a little later. Asibambe lapho ke mbukele sister Shelela ngasetolo. Please do join us after this break. Leli, Yilungelo Lakho. Welcome back. And the thing about the Tivuli ukuthi nawe ungaba ingcenye yalo hlelo ukuze ungashara icingo ku 011-714-6918 noma ke 011-714-6919. Ungasithumela futhi ne-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za. Ungaphinda futhi usithinze na ku Facebook. Namhlanje bekunene sikhuluma ke ngehlelo lamasipala i-Debt-rehabilitation program ngalamafishane ke kwesula kwetikwenethi tatamasipala nekuthi ke silwane sili le Debt-rehabilitation program nekuthi ke bangakhi ke lesebasitile ngoba phela siyathi ke balabanenge bakhungathwe ke kunasifo se-COVID labanye balahlekelwa umsebenzi, so it has brought about great financial difficulties for so many people. Hence the city of Johannesburg has come on board to come and alleviate and ease that financial burden. Namhlanje sina Nyaniso Jeku ke ukhulumela ke city of Johannesburg, sina Nkosikhulule Nyembezi, yena ke he's a policy analyst and researcher. Now Nyaniso simvile ke Nkosikhulule ngaphambili, before we enter that ad break, ukhulume ke he touched on so many pertinent issues, one of which ubutile ukuthi siyathi kubantu abaningi most ratepayers bede income, the only income they have ngema grants. Kuthi ke lapho ke what is the consideration?
You know, I really understand what that Nyembezi is saying as far as a consideration for a complete write-off, and that maybe the qualifying criteria are likely going to exclude some people and benefit quite a selected few. I think what also needs to be maybe taken into account, and this is what the city may have also considered when deciding on going about this route, is that you cannot completely write off debt for everybody. Yeah. You've got to look at the category of your ratepayers, because as much as the city understands the heavily indebtedness of the ratepayers, it also has a responsibility to continue providing these services. You need water availability, electricity, removal of refuse, and all of that. So if you collapse the city because you're trying to help, tomorrow there will be no city to assist the ratepayers at all. So basically, the city then went about saying, you've got a level of people who may have been largely affected by this and could not have been able at all. You know, those people are always first a target when companies are retrenching, and after their jobs, they cannot be able to survive at all. So the city had to look at that and say, which are the categories of people? And obviously, you've got to put criteria in place in order to sift through and see who qualifies for this. There are small businesses that have also been considered, also for debt rehabilitation. So you're saying, one, we would like to help as many people as possible, but you start in stages. You see how many are going to apply for this, how many are going to qualify, what will be the net financial impact of this exercise by the city of Johannesburg, and after that, will the city be able to remain standing after writing off so much debt, and will these categories of people who have been considered so far be able to move forward and paying the city? Because the city will only be able to self-sustain and survive if there's revenue generation in a form of municipal services that are provided by the city going forward. So you may have a situation whereby we start with this level of people, they qualify, they exhaust their debt. Once all their debt have been liquidated by having, you know, remaining through to the services that are offered, then we say, let's go to the next category of income earners. So you look at all of that, and what we must also note is that we're talking about property owners. We're talking about ratepayers here. So to start with, you would have had a house. You would have at some point bought this house. You would then be paying the house and paying the services that are provided to yourself. So we're talking about a selected category of citizens who are ratepayers in the main. So we have looked into the data that we have. They're in excess of about 900 million houses across the city of Johannesburg. So we've looked at that and say, what are the categories and what is the level of indebtedness of these people? And most importantly, as the city of Johannesburg, how can we assist? Where do we begin in assisting these ratepayers? So that's basically what it is all about. And so, that's the considerations that have been made.
Nyaniso ngivile ngandle benye ukuthi ke ngathi lolu hlelo licale lohamba kancane, but there's been a slow uptake of the initial debt rehabilitation program. Because the expectation is that people would have jumped at this opportunity.
Yes, it's a variety of factors, and I'll start with the first one. When we did this, we were in the middle of the pandemic, as we are. The lockdown was at its heaviest level. So what often happens, umasipala goes out to ebantwini and do public education and say, we've got this that we're offering to benefit yourselves. And this is often done in halls across all 7 regions of the city of Johannesburg, where ratepayers are then able to come in and then participate and ask questions and get to understand. But this time around, we could not be able to do that. We only do this educational campaign through Microsoft Teams. Basically, it was an online facility that we're saying we are educating you, we are consulting with you, we are further presenting how this is going to help. And indeed, as you know, the situation of electricity in our country, some would not be able to log on and be able to actually follow on what we are doing. Some would not have data because they cannot afford to have data. So that limited the thing. The other second factor that may have also limited is that this is not a blanket approach debt write-off program. There are categories in place. There's a qualifying criteria. So obviously, if there's a qualifying criteria, those who see that they do not qualify, they will not apply. Though we'll have some abezayo bathi mna ndiyafuna. Actually, in those online sessions that we've had, some were coming and saying, you know what, I earn more than what is reflected in the qualifying criteria, but I'm indebted. I would like to qualify. So you say, this is what has been approved by council to start with. So for anything else beyond this, it must then go for a fresh approval. So we are dealing with this level of category, with this level of property. Well,
at a later stage.
Well, maybe the city might consider looking at all other property owners and say, how do we help you? But also, this must not only be seen as the only option available and provided by the city of Johannesburg to assist ratepayers. Okay. Over and above the debt-rehabilitation program, there is ongoing programs that the city has. For instance, if you owe, you are able to approach the city and say, I am owing, I'm heavily indebted, I'm unable to sustain paying my account. How do you help me? I can't pay this outstanding balance as it is once off. Then you sit down with the city, and then the city will require all the relevant documents that it requires to prove your situation, and then look at what kind of a payment arrangement can be entered into between yourself and the city of Johannesburg so that you can continue paying. So outside the debt rehabilitation program, there are many other ways through which citizens must be helped. Hence, we always call on ratepayers to come forward if they owe us. They must not, you know, the first thing that happens when you owe is that they want to run away. But we're saying, come forward. We are able and ready, prepared to help you in whichever form. It's just that this one goes an extra mile. Hence, we call it rehabilitation. Because part of what must happen, you must be able to continue paying your account. Because, as you would know, amongst this is not only COVID, but generally, we've got something that ratepayers don't necessarily think of the city of Johannesburg every time they get money. The first thing that comes is your DSTV, is food for your household, and all those things. So what we're saying is that to ratepayers, the first person they must think of each time they get money is the city of Johannesburg. Because without paying for services provided by the city of Johannesburg, basically you don't have life. The food you would have bought, if you don't have electricity, you can't sustain. If you don't have water, you would have no lifestyle at all. So we're saying, consider and prioritize paying the city, because that is the start of your lifestyle. That is where your comfort actually is. So that is why we are starting with this level of category of ratepayers. And I can quite say to you that...
Please hold your thought, Nyaniso. We'll take our first caller. Cindy, Sagumole Hleleni. We've got a first caller in 4 ways here in Johannesburg. Cindy, Sagumole Hleleni. Siyaphila kunjani, Cindy?
Ngiyaphila.
Khuluma nathi, mama.
Yeah, ngavula i-account ngo-2019 ngihlala eSoweto.
Okay.
And then mangivula i-account ngikuma areas almost of 20,000.
Okay.
And then mangivula le account mangivulela a wrong account. I'm paying this ghost account. And then all of a sudden ngathola ukuthi ngine account ngapha engingayikhokhi. Mina I'm paying.
Manje Cindy uthi le account now ivula wathola ukuthi you are in arrears already of over 20,000.
No, then okay, the mangivula account everything was fine, right? And then ngaqala ngayikhokhela le account, ngiyikhokhela like even now ngiyikhokhela every month. But nginencwadi ngapha futhi yokuthi my real account is this one and I'm owing 20-something thousand. Then le ngikhokhelayo it doesn't exist. So I'm so confused because I keep on getting these calls yokuthi angize bazongiphungulela. Ngiyabatshela icase yami ukuthi I've been pleading ukuthi incorrect lento eniyenzile. Obviously I don't understand whether it was a mistake or it was a planned thing. Ukuthi ngizoba nama account two but on one property. I've been taken from this municipality. I started at 17 offices and then bayangisiza kube kuthiwa ku right and then again receive the same thing. Ngayiswa kwenye engapha ngase Midrand nakhona angisizakele because last month ngiphinde ngathola another call saying you are in areas and ama areas wakho asene interest. I'm saying please ngicela ningisize. Why ningathathi this money from the ghost account nisehlishe le mali enithi ngayikweleta ngapha?
Okay, siyabonga kakhulu ukushayela noma ngabe namhla ke sikhuluma nge-debt-rehabilitation program, kepha ke siyabonga ukushayela sinaye ke Nyaniso Jeku usikhulumeli ke samasipala, sathemba ukuthi utakusida kulolu hlangothi. Mbukeli asesisishilele ngasetolo, please do join us after this break. Sanibukela futhi bekunene ke leli lungelo lakho. Khumbula ke ukuthi nawe ke ungaba ingcenye yalolu hlelo ngethi ukusishaya licingo ku 0117146918 noma ke 0117146919. You can also email your thoughts to consumer@sabc.co.za or alternatively catch us on our social media platforms, in particular Facebook. Namhla ke sikhuluma nge-debt rehabilitation program yamasipala waseJozi, City of Johannesburg. Kuthi ke namhla sibuka ukuthi silwane sine le debt rehabilitation program nekuthi kubobani ke baqualify kubobani ke labangathola ke kusulelwa tikweneti kuma masipala. Namhla ke sina Mr. Jeku, Nyaniso Jeku ukhulumela ke masipala wase Johannesburg, kanye ke Nkosikhulule Nyembezi, a policy analyst and researcher. Mr. Nyembezi, please stay on the line. I'll touch base with you in a moment. I just need to clarify something na. Nyaniso simvile ke caller Cindy from Fourways uthi yena ke wathenga indlu nga 2019 wavula ke account wayibhadala kahle account, so it's now emerged ukuthi there's another account that is in her name. Kuthi kuyenteka lokho, is it possible to have two accounts, the other ones that you don't even know of?
Yes. Firstly, I really do feel for Usis Nyembezi for what she has gone through, but it is possible to have two accounts. This is what happens when you buy a house, when it is registered at deeds office through our departments in the city. There's linkage that happens up until it gets to the city. Once the city gets hold of information of property buyers, then an account must be created, your account, your rates, which is the tax that you are paying for owning a property. Then once that account is created, what is part of the responsibility of a ratepayer is to then come to the office of the City of Johannesburg to apply for service connections. Even though there will be water there, but there is an agreement that you must enter into for the supply of water and electricity to your property by the City of Johannesburg. Now, when you, and for that you must pay a deposit for water, you must pay a deposit for electricity. Then that happens when you come to the city. But in any event, when you do not come, a separate account is then created in your name. Now what often happens is that ratepayers will say, I am paying the city, but when you pay the city, you need to bear in mind what is it that you're paying for. If you've got water in your household, then you are paying for water. If you've got electricity and it's not prepaid, you are paying for electricity. The picking up of refuse removal from your house, when the truck comes once a week, you are paying for that. So when you flip your statement over and look at the back, the services that you are paying for are there. Your rates, your electricity, your water, your refuse, your sewer, that's what you are paying for. And if you do not see those on your statement, chances are the statement that you've got, which informs you of how much you need to pay, says rates kuphela. Then and this is actually as part of the property education that must take place when people are buying houses. And this is traditionally would have been done by the estate agent, saying while the rates account will be created by the city because the city links up with the deeds office, you need to apply for services. Why it is important to apply for services? It's because it's a contractual agreement that you're entering into, where your responsibilities will be tabled on that contract of supplying water and that contract of supplying electricity to a household. So that's why it's important. Over and above that, deposit is required for those services. So that is why. But over and above all of that, if you go to our service centers, we've got 50 of them, customer service centers across the city, 10 of which is what we call category A customer service centers, which basically offer full services in each of them. Across all regions, from region A to region G, you are able to be assisted, and these things can be dealt with and corrected. Where the city has erred, it will be able to correct. But also the other problem that we often experience is that the only correction ratepayers sometimes tend to expect is a complete write-off of the amount that is owed.
Yeah. Baba Nyembezi, ukhuluma nge-complete write-off. Siyathi ke ukuthi khona ke who are already calling for 100% debt write-off. Namuhla ke okay, let's Okay, ngiyeva ukuthi baba Nyembezi ke so uphinze usilahlekele ke layinini ke. Na ukhuluma nge-complete write-off ke, will this not cripple umasipala? Ngoba siyadle ke ukuthi ke khona ke vele lasebathi nokufuneka 100% because lo 50% vele khona labangasakhona ukusebenza, khona labaretrenchiwe ngenzaba ye-COVID-19 ukuthi will this not cripple the city?
You know, every case has got its own merit, but like I said earlier on, a complete debt write-off would potentially cripple the city.
Yeah.
When the city navigates this path of assisting ratepayers, it's got to consider that it still has a responsibility of providing services to the people of Johannesburg.
Yes.
You need to maintain the same infrastructure that you are using to provide water. Those pipes must be maintained. That water must be clean, safe, and healthy. That is why across the entire city of Johannesburg, you can open a tap anywhere and drink clean water that won't have any negative effect in your body. That is part of the maintenance that the city is doing. The pipes, the poles, the wires that connect your house, the fact that you simply press a switch and services come out, whether electricity, whether water, that alone is what the city must continue making sure that the standard that comes with living in the city of Johannesburg is maintained and sustained. Therefore, if the city becomes a big brother and say, no, don't pay for services, let's write off everything. Remember, we've also got a civic duty to educate the public that after all, in order for the city to sustain provision of services, you must pay. And we're talking about a metropolitan municipality that is expected to self-sustain financially. Now, for that to happen, it's got to collect revenue. So it is not necessarily possible, though there are different and various options available for a variety of categories of ratepayers. But a once-off blanket approach debt write-off would indeed definitely cripple the city, because the city looks at what it is owed and put on measures to collect that and then forecast how we're going to do whatever that the residents or the ratepayers of the city of Johannesburg are expecting. It needs to be done with money that comes from revenue generation, yes, collected from paying for the services that the city provides.
All right. We've since re-established connection with Nkosikhulule Nyembezi, but he's now joining us on the line. Baba Nyembezi, asasikhuluma complete write-off, khona ke bantu le who are now calling for 100% write-off, yet the city is offering up to 50% write-off. Will it not cripple the city?
Yes, complete write-off is not on the table. I think, one, we can affirm the stand taken by the city to say we will take this measure to do 50% write-off. If it comes to water and electricity and services being the human rights, then we know in the Constitution that there is what we call progressive realization of the rights. Mm-hmm. So the 50% which the municipality is putting on the table should be accepted and implemented in full, then assessed to see how far does it go to address the problem. And if it needs adjustments, it can be taken on. But I can advise the city to work with community advice offices, civic organizations, the churches, to publicize and create awareness on this available opportunity. Also taking into account that in some households, they are child-headed households. And so those people need to be handheld to be able to enroll onto the system, to complete the forms, provide the supporting documents. It's something they cannot do on their own. It is something that will need cooperation.
So could this be an option for the other municipalities to adopt?
Yes, of course. That is why we have the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, to promote these best practices, to say this is how we go about setting their criteria. This is how we go about administering the indigency policy, particularly on the issue of electricity. We know that year on year, NESA approves the increase of electricity price, and in so doing, the subsidy amount of electricity is not revised upwards, such that if you used to have electricity, buy it for 100 rand, it lasts you for the whole month. That is no longer the case. So the answer is yes. All municipalities must ensure that all South Africans enjoy these rights across municipalities and can use best practice. And that is why SALGA is there to facilitate that process.
Okay, Mr. Nyembezi, please stay on the line. We'll touch base with you in a moment. But for now, let's take another commercial break. Nasi ngibukeli ungasanyakati satsike shelele ngasatitolo. Leli ke ilungelo lakho. Welcome back. For your comments and questions, please do call us on 011-714-6918, number is 011-714-6919. You can also send us your email to consumer@sabc.co.za or interact with us on our Facebook page. Now, Mr. Jeku, asasikhuluma ukuthi ke bangakhi ke lesaba approvele lose ke bangakhi lesaba rejected.
To date, we've got in excess of 9,400 people who have already had their debt written off, and that is to a total of 350 million rands.
Okay.
Now, you can already see, if with just 9,000 people, you have written off 350 million, how much more if you are to do a complete write-off? And that is as per our assessment as at end of October.
Yes.
We are obviously have not stopped. We are continuing, and we continue to receive applications to process them, and we will be having a report maybe at the end of this month to see how many are. And we continue to call for residents to apply and come forward. The other problem is that you find that residents are scared to come forth and fearing that maybe this or that will happen. So in excess of 250 million have been written off to date for 9,400 and odd qualifying customers.
So are customers and ratepayers aware of this program? Does he take it upon himself to educate the people?
Yes, definitely. We do a variety of customer educational programs. I mean, we've started with online engagements. We continuously punt this on our social media platforms. We send customer newsletters. We also talk about this on every statement. At the bottom of a statement, there's a message that we always write there, just to make sure that it reaches out to everybody. And obviously, when this started, we advertised it, made sure that we speak about it. So they definitely are aware. Obviously, you may not necessarily and comfortably say everybody is aware up until you see the uptake. But the fact that we have got so many people who have qualified already, at some point when I checked, we had about 13,000 people who had applied. So that does tell you, across the city of Johannesburg, that does tell you that people are aware. Obviously, people might not all apply or qualify because of the criteria that is in place. As I've said before, I am to wonke. Akuthiwa wonke umndilili mawuze sizawurayithela off imali. Yabantu abathile ngokwe-categories zokunceda abantu based on their income category, their property ownership category, the value of the property. We also do help businesses and churches, small businesses. We also assist them as well. So we call on everybody to continue to assist. Actually, it's for that reason that we've extended. This was supposed to have ended on the 31st of July this year. And we said, well, the city decided that from August, basically, it must be extended up until the 30th of December. This is to give and allow an opportunity for people. Obviously, everybody
so,
has applied now.
because you just mentioned small businesses. But small business, does the same qualifying criteria apply?
There is a qualifying criteria specifically for the small businesses.
Okay.
For instance, they must prove that their annual turnover is not more than 3 million rands. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, they must bring their audited income statements to say, this is our financial status, we are a small business, this is proof that our annual turnover, we don't make more than 3 million rands, therefore we want to get this customer relief as well. So we do welcome them.
Manje nakukhuluma ngabo audited statement. Mina sengikhulumela abosomabhizinisi labancane uthola ukuthi ngama-hawkers bathengisa impahla bathengisa emaveji bangawathatha phi ama-audited statements.
But umuntu oyihawker usually they trade from the street. They don't have responsibilities of property. Remember, this is for people who have property ownership. So already the category of people you've mentioned, ayingobantu abaza own building from which they are trading, abaza own indlu from which they are trading. Therefore, naturally, those people will not be part of the targeted audience for this. So because this debt that the ratepayers have is towards service provided to their properties, the water, the electricity, the refuse removal, and everything like that. So we're talking about those people when you say they must come.
Baba Nyembezi, what's your take on the conditions of this program? Ucaba ukuthi ke lama conditions atawumukeleka yini kuba ma taxpayers nebathengi labaningi?
Unfortunately not. That is why, one, I would encourage the municipality to work with community advice offices, civic organizations. The Nelson Mandela Foundation, together with other clusters, they did a study in March last year, just 2 months after the COVID-19 hit us and the lockdown. And the report of that study was released in July of last year to say, for example, in the early childhood development sector, what are the vulnerabilities? What is the situation? Then we find that what the government had put forward as relief funds didn't touch on the people like those in the early childhood development sector. So if the municipality can read that report, they will see the picture. One, you will find that somebody in the informal sector, as you speak, others are doing welding. So you need to connect to electricity to do the welding, to do burglar doors and the gates and what. Others are baking amagwinya, and fish. Yes. And they to sell out there on the street. So it starts with the household. It starts with access to these services. And indeed, they will not have audited statements because we know that our government does not support informal sector, not even to extent of providing them with cash registers so that they can be able to account for the money they get and be able to access some of the funding that the government is providing. So the issue is this policy might need to be revised in order to take into account people who are in the informal sector for whom we can provide clear links that they need electricity, they need water in order to be able to sustain their businesses.
Ngoba phela baba Nyembezi siyathi lokuthi that sector, the informal sector lesengikhulume ngawo, including ama-hawkers labo labathengisa ke emagwinya nekudla etitradini, you may find ukuthi they owned property previously, but because of COVID-19 and other reasons balahlekelwa ngumsebenzi base ke bachubeka barana amabhizinisi still owning those properties ngayo leyo mali leyo. Kepha ke please hold your thought, we will touch base with you a little later on. That was Mr. Nkosikhulule Nyembezi. He's a policy analyst and researcher. We're also joined by Nyaniso Jeku, the spokesperson with City of Johannesburg. Asasisishele ngasetolo futhi sithathe ikhefu lethu lekugcina. Please don't go away. Siyabuya khona nyalo. Welcome to our final segment. Now, Mr. Jeku, so what happens to ratepayers who violate these conditions?
Well, part of the conditions is that, one, you must keep the end of the bargain in as far as paying the remaining portion of the debt that has been written off. Two, you must allow the city to have access to your property. Three, you must at least agree to the installation of a smart meter. This is why it's important for the city to have access to your property, is that most of the time, our meter readers, the City of Johannesburg meter readers, are unable to access some of the properties to measure consumption. Now, when consumption is not measured, it gives a wrong impression. The city is then forced to estimate, and whatever you're estimating is based on the overall consumption in that property, which might not necessarily reflect the amount of water, the amount of electricity consumed. Number two, the reason why there is an installation of smart meters, it is exactly to deal with that. Most meters get tampered with. You know, smart people are able to, work on these meters so that they can produce a desired level of consumption which they'll be able to pay and to be reflected among the residents who are paying. So we're saying the city's has been on a program of rolling out smart meters, meters that basically constantly and continuously interact with the city. These meters can be remotely monitored. These meters can be remotely read. You do not necessarily need to access the property to read them. So once you keep that end of a bargain, your property must be accessible, agree to the installation of smart meters. Then what happens if you do not agree? Obviously, this is a payment arrangement that you've entered to. Like any other payment arrangement, when you dishonor the arrangement, you've basically violated conditions that made this arrangement possible in the first place. And then your arrangement fall off. Once it falls off, you are then in the risk of having your water, your electricity supply terminated completely, to a point where even the meter can be removed. And to install a meter that has been removed, it is done at the expense of the ratepayer. So it is quite to the ratepayer's detriment to violate. Whereas if they continue honoring this arrangement, at the end of the day, they will be rehabilitated. At the end of the day, they won't owe the city. And most importantly, they will continue now to pay the city. Because to some ratepayers, it really never got into their understanding why it is so important to pay the city. And we are hoping that over the 3 years of repaying the remaining debt through a payment arrangement, you shall have at least got used to paying the city, and you'll continue accordingly. And at the end of the day, we'll have a ratepayer ownership database of payers who are actually paying the city monthly on time, all the time. So that's basically what we are hoping to achieve.
Okay, let's take our next caller. Sinavuse ulapha ke emiddle nsekumole hlelo sabona.
Sawubona kunjani?
Siyaphila kunjani baba?
Nami ngiyaphila baba.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Khuluma nasi baba. What's on your mind?
Yebo baba, ubusikhumethela. Baba, you know what? My biggest concern, I hear what is the city of Joburg is saying. My problem is almost 70% of Soweto residents are unemployed.
Yes.
Yes. How are they going to sort out that problem? City of Joburg, for the past 20 years, has been hiring people from the other provinces. Instead of they should hire their own residents so that they can manage to pay the rates. But now it becomes a problem that, you know, like I'm helping the residents of Soweto in many things on my own. I spend on my pocket, okay? Like to communicate with the city of Joburg, like to get the proper service delivery and all of that. You know, each and every time I go to the office, I only find the elderly people that are paying the rates. That, you know, they push as the gentleman said, that they ask them to pay certain amount and whatever. But I would say 70%, they are not going to pay the rates because they are unemployed. How is the city of Joburg going to sort out that mess up that they've caused? Because they cannot start in the middle to sort out this problem and say people pay. They should go back where the problem actually it has been caused, so that once they solve that problem, residents they will manage to pay the rates. But unemployment, if it's so high in the city of Joburg, then people is going to be a problem for city to collect that money. I understand that, you know, the whole internet having money and all of that, but they've got that problem. They should go back and they should get the proper advisors. They should go back to the Soweto residents and talk to them properly and inform them about this and educate them and get the employment in Soweto.
Thank you so much for your call, sir. We do appreciate it. Now, Mr. Nyembezi, let's talk about whether, possibilities of this particular program being manipulated. You know, bantu ke ba forge ema income abo kuze kuthi ke bafune qualifier. Will this not be open to manipulations?
Well, I don't think that is a serious threat or a serious concern. The serious concern is that the program is likely to fail dismally if it is linked to the installation of smart meters, linked to the access to property and all these things that my colleague is talking about. Why? The majority of people who live on these properties, they are not owners. You find that there is a baba there who's the head of household under whom the property is registered. But here there is a mother and children who are living here faced with the problem of not having access to services. And because they are not the registered owners, they cannot, as I understand, enter into an agreement with the municipality. So in other properties, you've got bed dwellers who are also reliant on these connections. And so now they are disadvantaged on the basis that it has to be the property owner who might not even be there or is not staying there. You know, in the city of Cape Town, in Stellenbosch, there is a place called Imizamo Yetu, and also in Hout Bay, Habitat for Humanity went and joined the program to eradicate informal settlements. They built formal houses for people. And then we went there after a year to assess how much has this changed your life to be moved from a shack onto a formal structure. And then we find that people had not occupied and lived in those houses. They are renting them out to Somalians, other people who are conducting business. That's because of unemployment. So the bottom line is this. The policy implementation that the municipality is proposing must be revised radically in order to reach those vulnerable members, even the upper limit in terms of qualification. Now you find that If you look at what is happening...
Okay,
at
Mr.
school-
Nyembezi, unfortunately, we're out of time, but yes, sabakhulu ke hlanganyela kunye nathi kanye nawe ke Mr. Jeku. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Ake mbukeli sesifika kanjalo maphethelweni ehlelo lethu namhla. Ngiseka sibonge ivakashi lethu ngesikhathi sato. Ngithatha buka kanye nani ngebabukeli ngoba nathi kuze kube manje. Please do join us again next Tuesday for yet another consumer affairs discussion. From Isimphiwe Ngongane and the rest of the team, sithi nihlale kahle. Do have a great week ahead. Cheers.